In this video, we're going to take a look at some of the hidden admin settings in Azure Active Directory that you definitely need to know. Stay tuned, you're going to learn something. Greetings my fellow YouTubers, Andy Malone, Microsoft MVP, as well as a Microsoft certified trainer. On this episode, I thought I would take a look at some of those hidden Azure Active Directory settings. You know, the ones that are a little bit tricky to find and sometimes you're not entirely sure as to what they do. Well, I thought I would take a look at them and what I think are some of my top things that you definitely need to know when working with Azure Active Directory. Now, if you've not subscribed to the channel, come on board. We love subscribers. Button that subscribe button up there, ring that bell, and you'll be sure not to miss out on any videos or postings. And of course, if you've got questions, comments about this or any of my other sessions, of course, please just get those down below and I will do my best for you. So I think without any further jibber jabber, I think it's about time we jump in with some demos and have a look at those key settings that will make a difference to you. Check it out. So for my number one, I'm going to come into the Entra Admin Center. I'm going to scroll down into Azure Active Directory and I'm simply going to go into the overview here. There's so much going on in this page that you really need to know. So first of all, you've got your tenant, you've got your tenant ID, and this is critical, especially if you want to do things like tenant sharing and so on. The other thing that you've got here, you've also got a monitoring tab, and this just shows you the overall performance of your tenant at the moment. And again, it shows you how many sign-ins that you've had in recent days. If you go to the Properties tab, again, it shows you your tenant name. So you can change this anytime that you want. You don't need to go with this, and this is in fact just a holding name. This shows you where the country or region is where the tenant is stored, and this one for this case is stored in the US. But again, you can put in a support request. For example, if you were moving to a different region or a different location, you can request a data center move. Again, you've got the tenant ID up here. You can put in your technical support contact. And again, here you can see access management for Azure resources. So you can see here the admin, they can manage all aspects of Azure subscriptions in the management group. So if you want to add more in, you can obviously add more in here if you want to. You've also got things like the security defaults. Now, watch out with the security defaults. This is a little setting that might stump you a little bit. If you're using things like conditional access, and you've set up conditional access, you've set up all the different settings, by enabling security defaults, it would essentially wipe those settings out. Now, this is perfect if you're an MSP, you've set up a tenant for a customer, and you want to give them a pretty good baseline of security settings. So in there, I would definitely say that's a great thing to do. We also have new recommendations, and this can work alongside things like Defender for Identity and various other features. So things like multi-factor authentication, or if there's an issue or an update, again, what could potentially be impacted on. So this is, again, quite useful. Note, you can also search by an article or recommended ID article here. I tell you what I really like is the new tutorials page here. This will take you through to learn.microsoft.com, and all these articles are awesome and really great to get you started in administering Azure AD. And the other thing is we also have a full set of videos here, so training videos that you can watch at your leisure. So definitely take a look at the holding page in Azure AD. Now, I'm sure you're all aware of where the users are in Microsoft Azure Active Directory. You simply go into Users. But sometimes you can miss the little things, and it's those things that are quite interesting. So you can now go into deleted users, and we have this new deleted users area, which is currently in preview. And I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Andy, that's not new, but it's amazing how many things you miss. Now, you can see here that the users will be permanently deleted after 30 days. And it's easy just to have a quick look at this, but you might not realize that you can actually scroll along and it actually shows you when the item is due to be deleted, both the date and time. And it also shows you if the item has been deleted as well. This can be super important. Now, of course, you might decide that Andy, is it possible to permanently delete the items? And again, it is. So you can bypass that recycle bin and you can delete these permanently. Now, just a quick warning about this. If you permanently delete this, that's it. It's gone permanently. And there is no way to bring that back. All right. So there's no kind of, oops, I made a mistake. You have been warned. All right, now, just while we're in here, the other thing that I just wanted to mention, while in the deleted container items, definitely go in and check out the views. So I can go in and I can edit the columns here. And more than this, look, check it out. You can change any of these columns and you can choose the different fields for the columns. So there's really a lot that you can do. And you can also move those columns up and down and so on. This is very, very cool. So you can customize pretty much any of these gridded screens now in Azure Active Directory. And that is super powerful, by the way. All right, now just while we're here, you can switch on the various preview features. So don't wait for those new features to suddenly appear. Go ahead, switch them on, become familiar with them because they will come in. Now, click on the little ellipse here and you've also got the feedback option there that you can give feedback, obviously, and that is super important for from Microsoft. So there you go. Just the deleted items preview, super important. And again, just a quick check. For my third setting, I want to come in here and just come out of users. I'm going to go into groups. And first of all, in the group settings here, there's a few really important settings that you definitely need to know. Things like self-service group management. So are you going to allow users or owners, rather, to manage groups? And obviously owners are really useful. For example, if you're using Microsoft 365 groups, and you can convert them into a Microsoft team, then of course owners can manage membership of those. And that's super useful if you've got a fairly large organization. You can also restrict the ability to access group features from the access panel. So if you don't want the users or certain restrictions, you can put them in place. In terms of security groups, are you going to allow your users to create these types of groups? So Microsoft 365 security groups via the portals. Again, Microsoft 365 groups, you might not want your users to create these. Another interesting area is expiry. So expiry is super useful. Often when users create Microsoft 365 groups, they can quickly spiral out of control. And indeed, you might find that the user doesn't end up using the group. So you have lots and lots of stale groups. So to avoid that issue, you can then put an expiry date on the group. So here you can see I've got in the admin support person, but this of course could be the email address of a team or a group that's involved in support. You can enable expiry dates for all groups or selected groups. Now, to be honest, it's much more likely that you're going to use this for selected groups. So you can see here I've got a Copenhagen group and this is due to expire within 6 months. Now you might ask, Andy, I don't want that to be deleted. And fair enough. Of course, you can assign a compliance policy on it. So you can basically archive the data. So another thing that you should know is anything that's got a temporary expiry on it, it's actually AI and machine learning that's constantly monitoring the group. Now, obviously, if it's used within 30 days of the expiry date, then what will happen is the AI will reset the 6 months for another 6 months and so on, and it will continue. until it's not needed anymore, and eventually the group will be taken and deleted. So that's a really useful feature, by the way. The other thing that we have here is also the naming policy for the groups. So again, you can put both blocked words in here, and also you can even have a group naming policy. So in here you can have a prefix. So for example, I'm in Oslo this week, so OSL sales, or you can have a suffix. So marketing OSL, whatever suits you. So the group settings are super important. And another thing that you can also do is you can now do access reviews, although this may require a premium license. Access reviews are awesome because access reviews are really useful because obviously if you've got group members, 6 months goes by and you suddenly remember, oh no, they've still got access to that group. This would essentially remind you. And you can assign these for both group access, applications, and also role-based access as well. So for my number 4 tip, definitely go down here into devices in Azure Active Directory. This is where you can manage all your mobile managed devices, or MDM, mobile device management. And this can integrate into tools like Intune and various other device settings. A couple of really important things that you definitely need to know here is something called enterprise state roaming. Enterprise state roaming can either work for every user or selected user. So if you're logging on via Windows, or Windows client, in the past, of course, your desktop, you might have heard of something called a roaming profile. So a roaming profile is where the user's desktop, things like my documents, my settings, everything is stored in a shared folder on premises on a domain controller. So how do we work with it now? Well, now it's essentially on by default, and you can see I can either add in users individually or I can just choose it for all users. So essentially your desktop profiles will be stored in Azure Active Directory. Now, of course, if you want to customize those with the likes of group policy, then you manage those nowadays in Windows Intune. Okay, so there you go, just a quick tip. Now, while we're here, the other thing that I just want to mention, of course, is BitLocker. So if you're working with Windows 10, Windows 11, then of course it's very important that you maintain and manage a database of your BitLocker recovery keys. So if an employee leaves the organization, essentially what you can do, you can add in the BitLocker recovery key here. And again, if you need to recover that machine, then you can do that. This is currently in preview. Definitely read the documentation on this. It's actually really, really super important. Okay, so just a couple of important things here. Enterprise state roaming and the BitLocker preview. Very cool. Now, one of my favorite features is actually just in the process of having an upgrade. I'm going to come down into applications, and here in applications or enterprise applications, you can see these are all the kind of cloud-based applications that I've deployed within my organization. Now, an interesting tool is if I scroll down here is something called usage and insights. And this can give you a really nice insight into how heavily the applications that you're using are being used. And likewise, you can also see if anybody's having problems with a particular application. So I can just scroll in here. Now I'm using the cloud portal just as an example here. And you can see it shows me that obviously it's an enterprise applications. I can go in and I can look at the roles. I can assign users and groups to this particular application. But the useful thing here is it really gives me a nice insight in. Now, the other thing that you can also do is I can go in and I can view the sign-in activity. So I can see how popular the application is. And again, you can filter this over either 30 days, 7 days, or indeed the last day. And you can also see if there are any failures. And failures could indicate that perhaps a user is having a problem and needs some help, or it could indicate that there is a bit of malicious usage going on. Now, if you're in hybrid and you're using legacy technologies like ADFS, of course, you will also get the same information here as well. Brand new and currently in preview, we have the service principal sign-in activity. So one of the things that you can now do in users, you can create a service account. And the service accounts are kind of managed service accounts. So very, very low level accounts with very limited permissions. Typically, you would use these for applications, and it's considered good practice for security. So we can now see what the usage of those is, as well as any things like application credential activity. And this can be useful just in case an administrator has perhaps used an admin account for an application, whereas they should have used one of these service principal accounts. So definitely check out the usage and insights feature in the enterprise applications in Azure. And finally, for admins, making the decision on whether to allow guests or external access into your organization is absolutely critical. So I'm going to come down here to external identities, and one particular set of settings that you definitely must know is the external collaboration settings. So in the external collaboration settings, this is where you control tenant-wide access for guests, okay? So for here, for example, guest user access, guest users have the same access as members. Guest users have limited access and guest users have very restricted access. So you need to decide on the level of guest access that you're going to allow. Now, more than that, you need to decide on who you're going to allow to invite guests. So if I go into the guest invite settings, one settings that you probably definitely don't want to go for is anyone in the organization can invite guests, including guests. I don't think so. Member users and users assigned to specific admin roles. So in Azure AD, one of the most useful roles that you can assign to, for example, managers is the guest inviter role. Also, owners can have this role as well, so that they can invite guests and external users. Only users assigned to specific admin roles can invite guests. Again, an example would be the guest inviters role. Or if you want to be completely closed down, no one in the organization can invite guests, including admins. All right, so this would be the most restrictive setting. I personally think that one is probably the one that most people would tend to go for. Do you want to enable self-service sign-up via flows or Power Automate? And of course, this is quite useful if you're using B2C or business to consumer. So if you've got a website with apps and you want your user to be able to sign in, they can sign in using their Facebook account or LinkedIn account or something like that. And this is really useful, external user leave settings. So when a user joins the organization as a guest, of course, they get access to the web. Now, one of the things that's really useful, though, is that you can allow the user to exit at any time. So they can go into their security settings, and if you click onto the organizations tab, they will see the organizations that they're currently affiliated with. And if the user is allowed to leave, they can click on leave, and that will then delete their guest account from Azure AD. Really useful. Now, finally here, if you want to have an allow list or a block list of any domain names or any domains that you don't want to be able to send invitations to, you can set those up here. So the external collaboration settings is absolutely critical. You definitely need to switch those on. Now, just a quick mention, the email one-time passcode has been removed to all identity providers. So Microsoft are moving various settings. So just make sure that you keep up to date with those. So there you go, just some of those cool settings. So there you have it, just some of my key settings that I think will make a real difference to you when working in Azure Active Directory. Now, of course, if you've got questions, comments about this session or any of my other sessions, then please just get them down below there. And of course, if you've not subscribed, well, hey, come on board. Come and join our great community by clicking that subscribe button up there, ringing that bell, and you'll make sure that you don't miss out on any future sessions or trainings. All right, that's it for this time. I really hope you've enjoyed it. You stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Take care. Hey, thanks so much for dropping by today. Here's a couple of videos that you may enjoy, and while you're here, go ahead, click on the subscribe button, and you won't miss out.